Now that is a far, far cry from the way we're doing things today. Wouldn't you agree? Wouldn't you agree with that? I mean, think about that. I mean, think about that. There's no other nation that ever began like that they wanted to establish the rule of God on this earth in America. Wow. Now that is impressive. And of course it would be based on the Ten Commandments and the Bible. That's what they were talking about. Now let me read to you something George Washington said in his famous farewell address. Quote, "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports." And then I went on and wrote about it in this little booklet on freedom without law. And without religion and morality, Washington knew the American experiment was doomed to fail. Without biblical religion and biblical morality, this constitutional experiment was doomed to fail. He knew that. And Adams backed him up. Here's what he said. John Adams, the second president, statesmen may plan and speculate for liberty, but it is religion and morality alone which can establish the principles upon which freedom can securely stand. Religion and morality alone, based on divine law. That's what they're talking about. I'm telling you, even the politicians in those days had more spirituality, it seems to me, by far, than even the spiritual leaders today, or the ministers in far too many cases. Isn't that true? I mean, we must face reality because our whole future is at stake. Isn't it time to face reality? Isn't it time to be honest with ourselves and admit what's happening all around us, what we see happening before our eyes all the time? Isn't that what we ought to be doing, you and I? I certainly think so. The forefathers really, I mean, they spilled streams of blood to establish the Constitution. And it's far harder to establish it than it is to maintain it. But let me tell you, we are not maintaining it. We're not maintaining it. Can anybody really, honestly disagree with that? Something all of us really, really need to think about. I think the Constitution is one of the most, well, I think it's the most noble political document in this world because so much of it was based on the Bible. It really was based on the Bible and protects us from the extremes of human reasoning. When people want to do harm to you, they can do a lot of harm if they are in government and they have all the power and you don't have any unless they are absolutely required to keep the Constitution, the law of the land. Well, let me read you something here that shows what's happening to our nation. Robert Bork was appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court by President Ronald Reagan. He didn't get confirmed, but he wrote The Tempting of America, and he said the Constitution is being altered dramatically. And he said even at that time, years ago, that he thought the Constitution was over 50% destroyed. But I'll take it a lot further than that today. A lot further, up to 95% and more. And I'm telling you, and I can prove to you that I'm right. What are we going to do about it? Well, we can only take that individually and do something about it. And every single one of us can do something about it. Every single one of us can do something. Notice what he wrote in that book. He said, a well-known Harvard law professor, Mr. Bork wrote, turned to me with some exasperation and said, well, your notion that the Constitution is in some sense law must rest upon an obscure philosophic principle with which I am unfamiliar. Now, this is a Harvard law professor. Now, and he made that statement. Now, let me read to you what the Constitution says, and you judge who is right, the Constitution or this law professor. Here's what the Constitution itself says, quote, "This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made on which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution of laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding." The senators and representatives before mentioned and the members of the several state legislatures and all executive and judicial officers both of the United States and the several states shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support the Constitution. But no religion's test shall be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. Well, now, if that's our most exalted institution, educational institution, has a law professor saying that, I tell you something is terribly wrong if our forefathers were right. And I'll tell you, we had some of the most brilliant men this nation has ever produced right there at the origin of our Constitution. See, this is what happens, though, if you reject the law even in Christianity. And don't you find Christians saying the law, many of them, most of them, saying the law is done away? And yet Christ said in Matthew 5, verses 17 and 18, that He came to fulfill the law, fill it full. It wasn't even filled full yet, because nobody had been keeping it by the Spirit, except a few isolated people in the Old Testament. But look, the problem is deep, deep, deep. When are we going to deal with the hardness of our own hearts? That's the problem. That's the problem we're dealing with. Notice what it says about the church in this end time. Verse 3 of 2 Thessalonians 2, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition." So before that day comes and the return of Jesus Christ, and we're getting very close, that's the really great news that the Bible has for us today, and it's absolute, and it's going to happen shortly. But before that day, there's going to be a great falling away in God's own church. Can you believe that? Just before Christ gets here? That's a sign that He's almost here. Well, you see, without the law, the Constitution falls apart, the church falls apart, everything falls apart. The church is in anarchy today. God's own church is in chaos. And then the nations are going to follow right on the heels of that. You can read that in Daniel 8, Matthew 24, and a multitude of other scriptures. And we'll send you some material at the end of this program to show you that. But this is a great falling away because of lawlessness. Not being lawful, but lawlessness, and it produces chaos. In verse 7, you can see, for the mystery of iniquity, it should read lawlessness. The mystery of lawlessness does already work, only he who now restrains will restrain until he be taken out of the way. That's the way it should read. But everything breaks down if you have lawlessness. You take the law, you see, out of the Constitution. If you destroy the supreme law of the land, you have nothing but ugly, evil human nature to guide you. None of the goodness of God that was incorporated into that Constitution. It was made a part of it. Let me read something to you here. Douglas Cox worked in the Office of Legal Counsel for Ronald Reagan and George Bush. Here's what he stated in the Wall Street Journal. Quote, "The entire justice system is predicated on the theory that witnesses will tell the truth. Permitting a culture of lying to take root in the justice system would ultimately destroy the system." Now, isn't that logical to anybody? They go into court and they swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and put their hand on the Bible and go through all of that ritual. But if they're liars, it means nothing. You see, there's something behind that, which is the same thing that has to be behind the Constitution, or it won't work. You can see even the whole system breaks down just from lying. That's what they're talking about. Without faith in God, that Constitution will not work. Here's what Adams said, that in 1798, he said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. It will not work." And even Alexis de Tocqueville saw that, and saw that that's what made the system work. He knew that about the Constitution, and he said the only thing that makes it work, and people, let's say, tell the truth when they are sworn in the courts and so on, is their faith in God and the Bible, His Bible. That's the only thing that makes it work. Without faith in God, it doesn't work. The Constitution was not made to work without faith. It cannot work. It will not work, and our forefathers told us that. Jeremiah said, "In the latter days you'll understand this perfectly," and he went on to say in verse 14 of Jeremiah 23 about, "I have seen also in the prophets of Jerusalem an horrible thing. They commit adultery and walk in lies." And he going on to talk about it's just the grossest immorality you've ever seen in your life, Sodom and Gomorrah and all of that. So what do you do about that? Well, look, America spends about $4 to $6 billion a year on pornography, which is family destroying pornography. We spend more money on pornography than we do on professional baseball. What are we religious? Or do we have a private morality, or is it a private immorality? I mean, really, I'm talking about the breakdown of the Constitution. I hope everybody can understand that. I'm concerned about that. George Washington said that we have a national character to build. And he was talking about the very character of God from your own Bible. That's what he was talking about. Ancient Israel just fell apart. And everyone did that which was right in their own eyes. And they were conquered by Assyria, and later Judah was conquered by Babylon. So you see, our spiritual forefathers even tell us what's going to happen. The Constitution will not work without us heeding what it says. It won't work, and so our own future is at stake.
As you heard on the program today, without God's law, all that we're left with is the ugliness of human nature as our guide. This is why, to America's founding fathers, character meant everything to the success of the nation and its leadership. But where did they get that idea? And what does it mean if we have strayed from that ideal today? This little booklet, Character in Crisis, is a great reminder of what the founders envisioned when they established the supreme law of the land. It will also give you a sobering preview of what's ahead for a nation that is drifting farther and farther from God. Call the number on your screen and request Character in Crisis. We won't charge you anything for it, not even for the phone call. There's no cost or obligation for you. We'd also like to offer you the God Family Vision, the God Family Vision book. When Jesus came to this earth 2,000 years ago, His mission was to declare the Father and the God family. Few people accept this truth, but it's plainly revealed in the Bible. This truth forms the foundation of the true gospel message that Jesus Christ proclaimed. If you study this book with an open mind, you will come to know the greatest possible truth that God could ever give to you, the truth about God's family plan for man. Call the number on your screen and request both of these free booklets